If you guys know anything about me, you're probably aware that I'm a huge fan of retro games. I have a game collection I've been working on for years. Well, a while back I decided to start a YouTube channel talking about retro games. It was growing pretty steadily, but I didn't really have time to keep up with it. Well, recently a friend and a fellow YouTuber, somebody I've collabed with before, Cyrus, had his account hacked. His entire channel gone. It was up to 30,000 subscribers. He tried to recover the account, but YouTube basically isn't even responding to him. He needed the channel more than I did, so I transferred my retro gaming channel to him to rebrand as his new YouTube channel. If you guys aren't already subscribed to it, you should. He and I have had the odd disagreement here or there, but overall, I believe in what he's doing and I don't want to see him fail. I left a link to his new channel in the description and the pinned comment, but since I'm scrapping the retro channel, I decided to re-upload the videos from it on my main channel. So sit back and enjoy the video. Let's get into it. Why does Shy Guy have a mask? What are his origins? Why does he look like Jason from Friday the 13th? Let's get into it. Before we get into it, I want to mention that I have a game store where I sell all kinds of stuff, from controller stands for the original Nintendo and Super Nintendo, clear through to the Xbox One and Switch. I also sell cartridge and box stands for every console you could imagine, so give it a look. And I have a Teespring where I sell shirts and stickers and stuff, so give that a look too. All links are in the description as always. So why does Shy Guy have a mask? Where did his character even come from? What's the story? As many of you know, Shy Guy first appeared in Super Mario Bros. 2. But what might not be as well known is the fact that Super Mario Bros. 2 isn't the real Super Mario Bros. 2. The original Super Mario Bros. Came out on September 13th, 1985. It was a massive hit. It was a pack-in title for the original Nintendo, so it's hard to tell how many units actually sold outside of console sales, but the game sold a total of 40.24 million copies. It was the first real splash Nintendo was making in the market. So when 1986 rolled around, Nintendo was a little gun shy and didn't want to spoil their good run. They decided to use the same engine and everything for Mario 2 that they used for Mario 1. It was exactly the same in every way, except they added a few extra features that didn't exist in the original. New mechanics like wind and others. The real big difference was the fact that the levels kinda trolled you. You'd go to jump over a pit and there'd be a coin box that would knock you in. There were piranha plants that wouldn't stop coming out even if you stood next to the pipe, that kind of thing. It was honestly really annoying. So when the sequel to Nintendo's biggest hit came overseas to America for testing, the president of Nintendo of America at the time was really nervous about it. He said he worried it would kill interest for the franchise right in its prime. So he called the president of Nintendo in Japan and asked if they could come up with a replacement. Enter Nintendo's development team, Research and Development 2, R&D 2 for short. They had a number of different development teams at the time, but the two primary ones were R&D 1 and R&D 2. R&D 1 had the famed Gunpei Yokoi, who I mentioned in one of my recent videos, and designed things like the Game & Watch games in the 80s, the Game Boy, the Virtual Boy, and the Game Boy Pocket, as far as consoles go. They also developed a ton of games. Metroid, Ice Climber, Balloon Fight, Tetris, Super Mario Land for the Game Boy, Dr. Mario, Wario Land 2, Kid Icarus, and a bunch of others. Those were probably their more famous products. R&D 2 designed lots of the consoles, though they did game development too. They designed the Famicom, which is the Japanese version of the Nintendo Entertainment System. They also developed the NES, the Super Famicom, the Super Nintendo, and the Satellaview, which is another interesting product we'll get into one of these days. As far as games go, they developed Donkey Kong, Donkey Kong Jr., Mahjong, and as time progressed, they went on to produce NES Open Tournament Golf, Super Mario Bros. Deluxe for the Game Boy Color, and then they did lots of the Mario ports for the Game Boy Advance. So R&D 2 was tasked with coming up with a Super Mario Bros. 2 replacement, since the original sucked. If you're curious how much it sucked, it is playable in America under the name Mario The Lost Levels on Super Mario All-Stars for the Super Nintendo. It was reskinned really well. I love the updated graphics and everything, but seriously, this game is awful. Not long before they were handed the task of coming up with a Mario 2 replacement, Nintendo had worked together with Fuji Television in Japan to produce a game to celebrate a festival that was taking place in 1987 called the Dream Factory Festival, or Yume Kojo in Japan.
マイル券はただいま発売中。みんな来てね。
Fuji Television at the time had their own culture and mascots and everything, so Nintendo basically designed a game around the Dream Factory Festival to reflect what Fuji Television wanted it to be. They named the game Doki Doki Panic. The term Doki Doki isn't really a word exactly, it's more like mimicking a sound, a heartbeat, like thump thump kind of. It was supposed to mean heart-pounding panic. Nintendo didn't want to make the game too similar to Mario. They wanted to make it its own unique thing, so they started experimenting with vertical scrolling instead of horizontal scrolling. Maybe the levels can go up and down instead of just left to right. That was one major change in the format. The game had clear references to the Dream Factory. They had 4 playable characters, and they were each basically mascots for the Dream Factory Festival. One character could float if you held in the jump button. One could jump really high and was kind of floaty in their movements. One was fast and small, and the other was big and slow. Nintendo's R&D 4 was the development team who created Doki Doki Panic. They owned the rights to the entire game since they developed it, but Fuji TV owned the rights to some of the characters in it. So what did Nintendo do when they were tasked with coming up with a replacement for Super Mario 2? They had Doki Doki Panic sitting on their shelves doing nothing. They took the game, replaced the characters owned by Fuji TV with Mario characters, and then shipped it back to America as Super Mario Bros. 2. They changed almost nothing else. Although the original Doki Doki Panic was on the Famicom Disk System, which was an add-on to the original Famicom. It basically just made it so the Famicom could take specialized floppy disks manufactured by Nintendo. It also had a saving feature, and Nintendo cartridges hadn't really mastered the art of saving yet. Some Nintendo cartridges did save games, like The Legend of Zelda, but it required a save battery. Most of them used a password system, like Metroid. So some parts of the game were changed to accommodate that. In the original Doki Doki Panic for the Famicom Disk System, you didn't get the true ending of the game until you beat it all the way through with all 4 characters. That was changed in the US version of Super Mario 2. You can beat the game with a single character and get the true ending. So if you were wondering why Shy Guy was wearing a mask, there's your answer. It was in honor of the Dream Factory Festival from 1987. The original Doki Doki Panic never made its way to America, partly because the Famicom's Disk System add-on never made its way to America either. And converting games from disc to cartridge was a lot more expensive and difficult than converting from Japanese Famicom cartridge to American Nintendo cartridge. So if you want to play Doki Doki Panic, you'll either have to use an emulator or import a Famicom, the Disk System add-on, and a copy of Doki Doki Panic. It's a pretty cool game, but honestly, you can get the same thing out of playing the US Super Mario Bros. 2. This is the original Japanese version of Super Mario Bros. 2. As I mentioned before, it's a very hard game, and it totally trolls you. It just plays like Super Mario Bros. 1, and honestly, I don't feel like the physics aged well. You can control your jump mid-air, but just barely. Not like you can in Super Mario World, or even Super Mario Bros. 3. Both are absolutely superb games, and aged phenomenally in my opinion. Mario Bros. 1 and 2 laid down the lore for the franchise. You're in the Mushroom Kingdom, where there was a rebellion. Bowser, aka King Koopa, came to steal the princess, and the Goombas you see all over the place are mushroom people who defected. They took Bowser's side, which is why they also look like mushrooms. The goal is to defeat Bowser and save the princess. Enter the US version of Mario Bros. 2. Completely changes everything. The bosses aren't Koopas anymore. The final boss is a toad named Wart. You spend lots of time fighting another character you might recognize, Birdo, whose gender is the subject of much controversy. Early Mario manuals said Birdo is male, but they gave it stereotypical female attributes, like a big bow, for example. The Super Mario Bros. 2 manual said he thinks he's a girl and shoots eggs from his mouth. But every other depiction of it has been female. And they paired Birdo up with Yoshi for a while too, implying they're a couple. That being said, I don't think there's anything wrong with Yoshi and Birdo being in a gay relationship. In fact, I'd be glad if Nintendo was giving the demographic some representation, but I know they wouldn't do it. Not in a kid's game. I mean, Disney came out with a gay character who you could barely tell was gay in Beauty and the Beast, and the world collectively melted down over it. So there's absolutely no way Nintendo would put that kind of implication in there like that. We have to assume Birdo and Yoshi are in a heterosexual relationship. Now, normally, that would mean Birdo is a girl, since Yoshi is a guy. But is he? Yoshi lays eggs, and it's presumably a reptile. As far as I know, only female reptiles lay eggs. So is Yoshi a dude and Birdo the chick? I'm getting off track here. The point is that it's confusing as hack. Here's some gameplay from the American Super Mario Bros. 2, aka basically Doki Doki Panic ROM hack. It's Super Mario Bros. 2 off of Super Mario All-Stars for the Super Nintendo. I could play the original Super Mario Bros. 2 US for the NES, but for one thing, I don't actually own that cartridge, so I can't legally play it on an emulator. I legally have to own a hard copy to be within my legal rights to own the ROM. And aside from that, I really like the graphics update on All-Stars. I think it's the definitive way to play these games. It's actually pretty fun, and when I was around 12, my sister gave me her Super Nintendo, which had been out for about 10 years already. Pretty heavily outdated. The PlayStation 2 might have already been out by the time I got my hands on it, but it came with Super Mario All-Stars, Super Mario World, and Bubsy. I played the shit out of those games, all of them. As I said earlier, Mario Bros. 1 came out in 1985 and sold about 40 million copies. It was a huge hit. Then Japan released Mario Bros. 2 in 1985, and that sold 2.65 million copies. Super Mario Bros. 2, the Doki Doki Panic mod, released in the US in 1988 and sold 7.46 million copies. Not bad, especially since it wasn't a pack-in title like Super Mario Bros. 1 was. Super Mario Bros. 3, an absolute classic game, was also released in 1988, and it sold 17.28 million copies. It deserved every one of those sales. For completion's sake, I'll list some of the other Mario games. Super Mario Land, which was a Game Boy release, also really good, released in 1989 and sold 18.14 million copies. Which is really surprising because Mario 3 had better graphics and was a way longer game. I would have thought that one would have had more sales. Anyway, Super Mario World for the SNES released in 1990 and sold 20.61 million copies. Another solid game. Super Mario Land 2 6 Golden Coins for the Game Boy released in 1992 and sold 11.18 million copies. Then, finally, Super Mario All-Stars for the SNES released in 1993 and sold 10.55 million copies. This was the first time the original Japan-exclusive version of Super Mario Bros. 2 made an appearance in the US. The game came with Super Mario Bros. 1, Super Mario Bros. The Lost Levels, which is the Japan version of Super Mario Bros. 2. Then it had the US version of Super Mario Bros. 2, and finally, it had Super Mario Bros. 3. And thus, a chapter closes on the beginnings of the franchise that shot Nintendo to the top. They honestly did a phenomenal job with those games. Playing Super Mario Maker 2 makes you realize just how hard it is to design a genuinely good Mario level that isn't too hard for anybody to master, but isn't too easy for everybody to enjoy. They'd introduce new mechanics in an environment where the player could get used to it before throwing them into a situation they didn't understand. They're free with power-ups, but not too free. It's seriously an amazingly hard balance to strike, and I have the utmost respect for Nintendo, mastering that balance since 1983, and doing a damn good job at it too. Anyways, that's all I've got for you. If you like what I do and you want to see me continue to do it, you might consider supporting me in a few different ways. First, you can support me through Patreon. That's probably the best way. But if you want to get something back for your support, you can check out my retro games store, where I sell all kinds of stuff, from controller stands for the original Nintendo and Super Nintendo, clear through to the Xbox One and Switch. I also sell cartridge and box stands for every console you could imagine, so give it a look. All links are in the description as always. Okay, thanks for watching, guys.